Hey gang, and welcome to Chapter 3, Providing Audiences with Useful Information, found on pages 44 through 65 in your textbook. The main goal of this chapter is to develop the most effective ways to reach your audience, depending on your purpose, and being sure that your audience can actually use that information. The first step is to create a usable document. According to your textbook, usability is a measure of how well that document fulfills the information needs of its audience. In an effective document, a reader should be able to do the following with very little effort. They should be able to locate the information they need easily, understand the information immediately, and use the information safely and successfully. To accomplish this, the writer must follow these steps. They need to analyze the audience, determine the purpose, create a task analysis for the document, consider the setting and other potential problems, develop an information plan, and write, test, and revise the document. Does this sound familiar? These are almost the same components of the rhetorical situation, which you may remember from your English 101 days. Regardless, answering these components will give any writer the means to effectively compose a document and reach their target audience. The first process, naturally, is to determine exactly who that target audience is. You'll want to consider every angle of that who question, which usually leads you to determining a primary and secondary audience. A primary audience is one with an immediate use or need for the document, while a secondary audience usually disseminates the information to the primary audience. For example, think about this textbook. Its primary audience is you, the student. However, it must also appeal to me, the instructor, as a secondary audience, who ultimately decided to use it in this class rather than some other text. Also, parents screening movies for their children is a similar example. Sure, the creators of Frozen didn't make the film to appear only to adults, but they had to make sure that it met parents' expectations, so they will let their children watch it, and then sing Let It Go for the next 2 years. If only parents had known. In determining your audience, you'll likely consider what your relationship is with that audience. Are they your coworkers, superiors, potential clients? That relationship will not only affect your tone, but also the method of your persuasion. You'll also want to consider your audience's technical background with respect to your subject. How familiar is your audience with the material you are presenting? Are you trying to sell the new Galaxy S 2077 Edge to teenagers or to grandparents? For this, you'll want to target only the main audience. Take a look at the Bayer aspirin examples on page 48 and 49 of your textbook. The one on the left is aimed at the general public, the consumer, so it gives only the barest medical information about the product, focusing more on what it can do for you, and forefronts the coupon, which is always good for the consumer. Whereas the medical journal entry on page 49 is more detailed, it even has the chemical breakdown. A man suffering from back pain doesn't care about the chemical equation, but a doctor might. It all depends on what your audience is. Considering your audience will cue you in on how much jargon or specialized language you can get away with. But in general, if you're not writing to a very specialized audience, you'll probably want to use what we call layman's terms, or more common language to get your point across. An audience's cultural background is just as important as technical background. Different cultures value different qualities and will respond differently to modes of persuasion. Be sure you're doing your homework. You wouldn't try to sell a product to a Japanese company the same way you would to a company based in Kansas. The strategy section on page 50 has some great tips on how to consider different cultural backgrounds. After you know who you're talking to, you'll probably want to consider what exactly you're trying to do. What is your purpose in addressing this audience? Consider how the reader will use the document and identify the primary and secondary purposes. Generally, your document will be trying to inform, instruct, or persuade the audience. and usually there will be some combination of the three. Begin by writing out a comprehensive purpose statement. It might be helpful to think of this as your thesis statement for the document. Start off blatantly, just to get the information down. By the end of this document, I expect my audience to be able to accomplish the following. And then you can nuance the purpose from there. Once you know your audience and your purpose, you'll be able to figure out what is the best way to persuade your audience, which is almost any document's underlying purpose. One method of persuasion is using claims. If you know ahead of time that your audience is likely to disagree with you, for instance, you're trying to sell a product to a company who is already using a competitor's product, you'll likely want to start with rational proof as to why your side is better. This takes 3 steps. First, start with the claim or fact. Then explain what those facts mean, especially to your reader. And then tell your reader what they are to do with this information, i.e., agree with your undeniable logic. Your logic is undeniable. Your logic is undeniable. Another method is connecting with your audience. If your audience is less anonymous, you can likely persuade them with a personal connection, which could take 3 forms. The power connection forces the reader to comply based on your superiority, like when mom says, "Because I said so." Yeah, it's still not satisfying to hear. Another is the relationship connection. This allows your reader to empathize or sympathize with your line of reasoning, especially when the benefit is mostly for you, the author. It's like they're doing you a favor. How nice. Finally, there's the rational connection, where the reader realizes the mutual benefits of your line of reasoning and agrees as much for your sake as for theirs. Everyone wins. Yay! Check out the chart on page 53 for a handy visual. Next, your book outlines several other potential problems for any given document. These can usually be avoided by carefully choosing your document genre or form. The setting, for example, is where the reader will engage with the text and what implications that setting has on the reader's understanding, retention, and application of that text. If you're proposing a new PE program in an elementary school, you're going to pitch the idea differently to kids in the classroom, probably with hands-on activities, than you would to the Board of Regents, who probably wouldn't be as excited to play a game of knockout or a relay race. The kids would probably be in a classroom, or outside at best, whereas the Board of Regents would be in some sort of conference room, and thus much more conducive to a report-style proposal. Identifying the genre will usually solve these problems before they even exist. You wouldn't try posting an essay to Facebook. Too long, didn't read. But an editorial in a newspaper might be more effective. The final step is giving the document a test run. Never send a formal document out cold. Both you and someone else on the project, or perhaps someone who is familiar with the content, should look over the text for these elements. In the content, look for inaccuracies, issues with application, audience connections, issues with definition, and any gaps in the logic. When you examine the organization, you're looking to see if there is a clear, visible structure to the document, looking if there are any components that are out of order, or asking if the information is chunked into digestible sections, kind of like this PowerPoint is, as opposed to it all just being thrown at you in one big document. Finally, when you consider the style, you'll look at if your audience can easily understand your document, and you'll consider issues of clarity. Next, you'll want to take another look at the layout and visuals of the document. Is there a clear reason behind the visuals, or do they distract from the content? Remember the goose? Don't be a goose. Next, you'll look at the ethics and consider them within your document. Look for distortions or misrepresentations in the facts, look for biases, and consider the cultural audience. The very last step should be to proofread for grammatical or mechanical errors. Don't think you can double task and do this at the same time as your other proofreading. It should be done separately and given your complete attention. Print out the paper and read it out loud. You'll be surprised at how many typos and awkward phrases you'll run across. Naturally, this step is the one that almost always gets skipped because you don't give yourself enough time. Don't procrastinate. Give yourself the time to proofread. Trust me, you'll need it. That's it for Chapter 3. You'll likely want to revisit this chapter over the semester, as it has some very foundational information that you'll use in almost every assignment. Take care.